A Global Religion by Tobias. It began with alcohol, as more than one religion must have done before. I wanted to be drunk by the time I got home. It's a habit I picked up after my divorce, when I realized how cold an empty house can be without a little fire in the blood. There's a pub around the block that lets me park my car overnight. I'd stop after work and walk home when I couldn't feel my face anymore. The chill morning air on my walk back helped me wake up enough to drive to work, and then I'd do it all again. I'd thought about going to Alcoholics Anonymous, but I figured I could do the same stuff they did on my own. All I had to do was surrender myself to God, right? To admit that I'm helpless and He's all-powerful, and accept that He doesn't want anyone to have any fun. It's getting to be winter here, though, and one night it was so damn cold that I felt like my skin was peeling off just standing outside. I'd drive home just this once. No one else was on the road, and I thought I could inch along without any trouble. I don't know how I turned down an unfamiliar road this close to my home, but whether it was a trick of the darkness or the alcohol, I presently found myself before a row of strange houses. Piles of trash, boarded windows, and even gutted skeletons of burned houses loomed above me on either side. I was about to turn back when something dark dashed in front of my car. I slammed my foot down, and somehow the shock crossed my wires and I hit the gas instead. The car lurched forward and I heard a loud, wet noise like someone belly flopping into a pool from 10 stories up. I heard the second bump as my back tires rolled over it before I could stop. I threw open my door and stumbled out. There was a long, glistening streak behind my tires, a crumpled shape in the road, and one naked white bone jutting out to reflect the light of my taillights. I threw up. It was a long one, where you kept heaving and spitting up bile and drool long after my stomach was empty. I could hear this pitiful moaning in the whole time, but I was helpless to my trembling contractions and couldn't help him. I thought I was too late by the time I walked back to the mess on the road. There wasn't an inch of unmarked skin or a limb that wasn't folded back on itself. The broken form looked more like it had gone through a blender than hit by a car. "Please," the voice said, gurgling and spurting as it did. "Please forgive me." "Forgive you? Shit, I was the one. Hold on, I'm gonna call for help." I'm sorry. I know I deserve this, but have mercy." It took supreme concentration to force my clumsy fingers to dial 911, but I froze before I hit the call. The broken form was rising, and dozens of fingers were intertwining in front of it, like a gesture of prayer. Dozens. I kept blinking, sure the alcohol was playing tricks on me. As it continued to stand, it became undeniably, though, whatever I was looking at wasn't human. I couldn't understand how my car could have done that much damage, but now I saw it hadn't. The creature's body was covered in boils and welts, many of which were long since ruptured and wept rivers of dried blood and pus. Its third leg was shriveled as though devoid of muscle or bone, dragging limp on the ground behind it. Veins across its body stood out like knotted rope beneath the skin, except in many places where they exited the skin entirely to tangle with one another before sinking back into the flesh. I felt a nausea swelling up within me again, but I was too empty to vomit again. We stared at each other for a long moment before it said, "You're not one of us." I shook my head. Something like a snarl across its face, destroying its last vestige of humanity and replacing it with a mask of bestial terror. "You don't know how long we've waited for you," it hissed. I turned and began walking towards my car, swaying but remaining upright. "Please don't leave us." The terrible wail behind me only made me hasten my pace. "The others are coming." I dropped heavily back into the car and slammed the door. I spent a few moments fumbling with the buttons before I heard the doors lock. I relocked them a dozen times just to be sure. When I looked up, I could see the face of the creature filling my rearview mirror. It bore traces of being human, but only so much as butchered meat, hints of finely prepared meal which might be made from it. The car's side panels on either side shook, and there were more of them peering through the windows. Then, a loud thump on the roof and pitter-patter of those dozens of fingers probing along the surface, feeling each ridge for a way in. Though mirrored in the dead of night, the surrounding street had come alive. The light of flames flickered into existence in the surrounding houses, and where there was no flame, a sea of eyes reflected the light from the shadows. Long fingers pried away the boards on the windows, and much of what I had mistaken for trash now shifted with the teeming beings of which were huddled underneath. "Don't leave us! My pure skin! My love!" A living echo which multiplied with every utterance. "Love! Love! Never leave!" I maneuvered the car forward, trying my best not to hit anyone. My hesitation only made it more difficult as the creatures continued pressing in around the car. I had no choice but to floor the pedal and press through them, hoping they'd get out of the way. They didn't. If anything, they made an active effort to hurl themselves before the car, as though their bodies could slow my departure. The wails rose in pitch around me, the agony of the fallen growing more frenzied and desperate by the second. Each that was crushed or wounded by the relentless passage of my car would swiftly seized by their massing brethren. Such victims could not defend themselves and were swiftly torn to shreds, devoured alive before my eyes. The empty space was filled at once with more creatures who hurled themselves before me, only to be met by the similar gruesome fate, crawling headfirst down from the windows or digging up from the ground or manifesting from the darkness. This swarming legion flooded towards me in all directions. I increased my speed and gave no regard to the constant buckling of the car as it rolled over the incessant mob. But I could not block out the wailing grief nor the chanting which arose from every corner of the blasphemous street. Dark hymns whistled and shrieked with feverish pitch, and again the echoes which spread through the chaos like an infectious disease. "We need you! We love you! Our pure-skin God! Take us with you! Don't leave us! Our pure-skin God!" Until I finally gained enough acceleration to tear through the last of them and break free onto the open street. Many tried to race alongside of me for as long as they could, their deformed bodies moving with desperate urgency until they collapsed in exhaustion and were beset by those behind. I didn't dare slow until I had left the madness far behind and found myself on a solitary hill. I paused to look at the view and get my bearings, but I recognized nothing that I saw. Unfamiliar towers gouged the sky, mountains lit by firelight. The neighborhood I passed was no anomaly, for as far as I could see, the ruined buildings were writhing to life with the swarming creatures. I couldn't stay long, though, for already bright eyes were reflecting from the darkness around. I drove again until I found a larger road, and then taking that I kept going until I found a highway. The echo had spread far past the street of its origin, and I heard the phrase, "Pure skin," follow me where I went like rolling thunder across the land. I was the only car on the highway and remained so for many miles while fleeing that awful den. My head ached and I was exhausted, but I forced my eyes to remain locked on the road ahead of me and didn't deviate from my path. It wasn't until the early hours of morning when I heard a siren and suddenly realized I was no longer alone on the road. The daily traffic had gradually resumed around me, each car occupied by a human driver, bored, sleepy, and ignorant to the denizens of the dreadful night. "Do you know why I pulled you over?" a policeman asked when he got out of his car. "Because I'm wretched and I deserve it," I managed to reply. "I'm more concerned about that blood on your car," he said. Good thing it wasn't human blood, or I could have been in real trouble. I don't know how I stumbled into that world, but I think I accidentally started some sort of religion there. So must all things seem glorious to the wretched, if only they understood how small and powerless their pure-skinned God really was.